The sound of champagne glasses striking together still lingers in my memory, bright and hollow, like tiny bells marking the moment my marriage shattered. I remember the string quartet in the corner, their bows suddenly suspended midair, as if even music understood what I hadn't yet. We were in the middle of a grand anniversary celebration, Daniel's family hosting an elegant party in Manhattan to honor our 7th year of marriage. I stood there in a silk dress smiling, pretending to believe in forever. But forever ended when a small, steady voice cut through the chatter of the room and called my husband a name I had never expected to hear. Daddy. That single word dropped like glass on marble, and the ballroom fell into silence. My eyes found the child first, a boy no older than 6, clutching the hand of Camille. My Camille, the woman who had been at my side since high school, the friend who had sworn to love me like a sister. My gaze shifted to Daniel, his face draining of color, his eyes darting between the boy Camille and me. In that instant, the truth was written across his features, and every piece of my world began to crumble. Before I tell you the rest, take a moment to let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And if stories of betrayal and justice speak to you the way they do to me, don't forget to like and subscribe. It means more than you know. My name is Claire Whitman, and until that night, I believed my life was something solid, something I had built with my own 2 hands. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, raised by parents who taught me that loyalty and hard work could weather any storm. When I met Daniel in my mid-20s, I thought I'd found the perfect partner to share those values. He was ambitious, magnetic, the kind of man who could make anyone believe in him after 5 minutes of conversation. We married young, and though money was tight, I convinced myself we were building something lasting together. Daniel had a vision for a startup, and when it faltered, it was my inheritance from my mother that kept us steady. I handled the bills, the mortgage, and the endless budgeting, while he played the role of the dreamer. He liked to joke that I was the CFO of our marriage, and I wore that title with pride, not realizing how much weight I was carrying on my own. Then our daughter Lily was born, and every sacrifice felt worth it. I stayed up through fevers, filled out preschool applications, and held her close during storms, while Daniel made appearances as the doting father when the world was watching. Through it all, Camille was there. She wasn't just a friend, she was family. She had been my maid of honor, my confidant, the person I trusted to watch Lily without hesitation. She knew where we kept spare keys, knew the bedtime stories Lily loved, knew even the corners of my heart I rarely shared with anyone. To me, Camille was the anchor that steadied both my personal life and my friendships. Never in my darkest thoughts did I imagine she would be the one to betray me. But as years passed, I noticed small shifts I tried to ignore. Daniel's phone always close at hand. The cologne that didn't smell like him. The excuses of late-night training runs or dinners that never added up. And Camille's name spoken too casually, as if it had slipped onto his tongue by accident. I told myself they were coincidences, that I was imagining shadows. I didn't want to believe otherwise. My whole identity, my whole family was rooted in believing otherwise. That night at the party, when the boy walked in and called Daniel Daddy, the illusions fell away in an instant. The people we loved most turned to stare, the whispers rising like smoke through the air, and all I could feel was the floor tilting beneath me, forcing me to face the truth I had been refusing for years. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was only the beginning. I replayed that moment over and over again, the boy's voice rising above the music, the silence that followed, and Daniel's eyes darting around like a trapped animal. For days it lived in my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. The party ended in chaos, but even as I walked away that night, I still hoped there might be some explanation. It's strange how denial clings to you, even when the truth is staring you in the face. The signs had been building long before the ballroom doors opened. Daniel's habits had shifted in ways that seemed small at first. He started carrying his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom, and locking the screens so quickly it felt rehearsed. He changed his cologne, saying he wanted something more mature, though the scent didn't smell like him at all. Then there were the late-night excuses, training for half marathons that never materialized, dinners that didn't appear on his calendar, meetings that seemed vague and untraceable. And Camille's name slipped into conversations too often, like a song on repeat. Camille mentioned this new place we should try. Camille says yoga helps with stress. Each mention was casual enough, but I felt something tighten inside me every time. I told myself they were close because she was family to us. She had been my best friend since I was 15, the one who carried tissues in her bag for me during heartbreaks, the one who cried hardest at my wedding. She loved Lily as though she were her own niece, and I trusted her with everything: keys to our home, our emergency cash, the tiny details of our life I shared with no one else. There were moments I almost confronted Daniel. Once I found a charge for an expensive dinner for two on our joint card on a night I sat home with Lily. He brushed it off, saying he'd taken a colleague out to thank him for his work. Another time, I spotted a faint streak of glitter on his collar, and he laughed, saying it must have brushed off when Lily hugged him after playing dress-up. The explanations sounded flimsy, but I let them stand because the alternative was unbearable. It wasn't until Mia called late one night that denial cracked open completely. Her voice trembled on the other end of the line, the kind of tone you recognize instantly when someone has seen something they wish they hadn't. "Claire," she said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw Daniel tonight. He wasn't alone. He was with Camille." I remember standing in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming behind me, holding the phone so tightly it hurt my hand. Mia went on, her words spilling quickly, as though she needed to get them out before she lost the courage. She'd been at a downtown restaurant with friends when she spotted Daniel and Camille seated at a corner table. They weren't just having dinner, they were leaning close, holding hands beneath the tablecloth, their faces lit with the kind of intimacy you can't fake. Mia even sent me a photo she had taken discreetly from across the room. In the picture, Daniel's hand covered Camille's, and they both wore the same expression of comfort and closeness Daniel once reserved for me. I stared at that photo until my stomach burned, but still I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe it was business. Maybe I was misinterpreting. But deep down, I knew. That night, I lay in bed next to Daniel, listening to his even breathing, and wondered how long he had been lying beside me with another woman in his heart. The final blow came from Lily, of all people. One morning, she climbed into my lap while I was sipping coffee and coloring with her. She said it so casually, like she was sharing a secret about her toys. "Daddy forgot his little phone," she whispered, "the one he keeps in Auntie Camille's shoebox." The words landed like a punch to the chest. I froze my mug halfway to my lips, staring at her wide, innocent eyes. I asked her to repeat it, thinking I must have misheard, but she said it again, even pointing toward Daniel's gym bag where she had seen him tuck it away. A second phone, hidden at Camille's. The truth was no longer hiding in shadows. It was sitting on my daughter's tongue, pure and unfiltered. Every sacrifice I had made for that man suddenly twisted into a weapon he had used against me. I had poured my inheritance into our home, balanced the bills, and stood by him while his business faltered. I had trusted Camille with the closest parts of my life, and all along they had been building a secret life together, one that surfaced in the form of a little boy calling my husband Daddy. That morning, denial died. I looked at Lily, brushing her hair away from her forehead, and knew I couldn't stay blind another day. Betrayal wasn't just about broken vows or whispered lies. It was about years of my devotion being met with deception. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. And as that realization settled, something inside me shifted. It wasn't despair that rose up. It was resolve. The first crack had become a break wide enough to see the truth clearly. And once I saw it, there was no going back. The days that followed felt like I was living inside someone else's skin. I went through motions packing Lily's lunch, answering work emails, walking through the market with a basket in hand. Yet everything felt distant, muted, almost unreal. Every smile I gave to a neighbor or coworker was practiced painted on to hide the storm underneath. Inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. Nights were the worst. I lay awake beside Daniel, who slept so soundly it felt like mockery, while I stared at the ceiling, counting cracks I had never noticed before. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind refused to rest. I thought about Camille's hand in his, about that little boy's voice, about Lily's innocent confession of the little phone. My chest tightened so often that I caught myself pressing a palm against it as though trying to hold myself together. I cried silently into my pillow, always careful not to wake Lily. When I tucked her in at night, I kissed her forehead a little longer, breathing in the sweetness of her hair, grounding myself in the one piece of my life that felt unbroken. She was my anchor, my reason for keeping my pain private. I refused to let Daniel's betrayal shadow her childhood more than it already had. At work, I forced myself into discipline. Numbers were steady, logical, reliable. Spreadsheets didn't lie or cheat. Still, I'd catch myself staring out of the office window, coffee cooling in my hand, wondering how long Daniel had been slipping out of our life one secret at a time. My colleagues probably noticed my distraction, but no one said anything. I was grateful. The last thing I wanted was pity. Mia called often, her voice heavy with worry. She asked if I was eating, if I was sleeping, if I wanted her to come stay. I told her I was fine, though my reflection in the bathroom mirror told a different story. My eyes looked hollow, my cheeks pale, and there was a tremor in my voice, even when I thought I sounded steady. But Mia knew better. She always had. "You don't have to be strong every second," she whispered one night. I swallowed hard and thanked her, but I couldn't break down. Not yet. The house itself turned into a battlefield of memories. The smell of Daniel's cologne lingered in the hallway, sharp and foreign. The framed photos on the mantel felt like taunts, smiles from vacations, birthdays, and Christmas mornings that now looked staged. I began to avoid the living room, staying in the kitchen, or Lily's bedroom, anywhere I didn't have to see evidence of the life I thought was real. Even the smallest moments became landmines. A message notification lighting up Daniel's phone sent my stomach dropping, though I forced myself to glance away. His gym bag by the door seemed heavier, as though it hid more than just sneakers and a towel. I found excuses not to touch his laundry, fearing I might discover another trace of her lipstick perfume glitter that didn't belong to me. And yet, I kept silent. Outwardly, I moved through the days with a mask of normalcy. I laughed softly when Lily told me about her playdates. I nodded politely at Daniel's vague stories about meetings. And I even sat beside Camille once when she stopped by listening to her chatter, as though she hadn't already stolen the core of my life. My silence was my shield. I wasn't ready for the explosion, not yet. I told myself I needed proof, but the truth was, I wasn't ready to face the collapse. Facing it meant admitting that the man I had trusted most and the friend I had cherished most had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. It meant admitting I had been blind. It meant admitting that the marriage I had carried on my shoulders for years was never what I thought it was. The quiet suffering weighed on me, pressing harder with every passing day. Some mornings, I sat at the kitchen table long after Lily had gone to preschool, staring at the steam curling from my mug, unable to take a sip. My hands trembled even when I tried to steady them. My mind whispered questions I couldn't answer. How many years had it been going on? Did Camille laugh about me when she lay beside him? Did Daniel ever think of Lily when he snuck off to see his other child? There were no answers, only shadows. And yet I held my pain tightly inside because speaking it aloud would make it too real. I chose silence, not out of weakness, but because silence was the only way I could breathe. But silence never lasts forever. I knew deep in my chest that sooner or later, denial would give way to action. For now, though, I lived in the quiet ache of knowing too much and saying nothing, waiting for the day I could no longer ignore the truth. The morning after Lily's quiet confession, something inside me shifted. I woke with swollen eyes and a hollow chest, but beneath the exhaustion was a current of cold determination. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the hum of traffic below, and realized I couldn't keep living suspended in silence. I had been waiting, hoping, praying for Daniel to show me something redeemable, but there was nothing left. Denial had kept me still, but truth demanded movement. I pulled Lily into bed with me, wrapping her in her purple blanket and kissing the top of her head. "Mommy's got this," I whispered, though she was too young to understand. It wasn't a promise to Daniel, and it wasn't even a promise to myself. It was a vow to her. She deserved a mother who wasn't broken by betrayal, a mother who could protect her future without hesitation. By noon, I was at the kitchen table with my laptop open, logging into every account that carried my name. I froze. Our joint checking account canceled the cards and ordered replacements that would come directly to me. Daniel's platinum card, the one he carried like a badge of status, was disabled before he could swipe it again. I moved my mother's inheritance into a new bank, entirely shielding it from his reach. As each confirmation email came through, my breathing steadied. Every click was a step out of paralysis. Next, I called Tessa Harding. She had been a classmate from college, one of those friends who always reminded me I was underprepared when it came to legal safeguards. For years, she had told me to update our prenup, and I had brushed her off, convinced it wasn't necessary. This time, I didn't hesitate. I barely finished explaining when she cut in, her voice firm and direct. "Good. About time. Send me everything, accounts, deeds, transfers. We'll start drafting today." The steadiness in her tone grounded me, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. The condo came next. It had doubled in value since we bought it, and I was the sole name on the deed. I called a realtor I trusted and asked for a market assessment. Within hours, I had comps sitting in my inbox, proof that this home could fund not just survival, but a new beginning. The thought of leaving those walls heavy with lies suddenly felt like freedom. Packing started in Lily's room. I folded her tiny dresses, tucked her crayon drawings into a folder, and slid her favorite stuffed animals into a box. I wanted her transition to feel gentle, not like a hurried escape. When I turned to my own things, I was deliberate. I gathered documents, jewelry I had purchased myself, the laptop I relied on. The gifts Daniel had given me, however, bracelets, handbags, the watch he presented on our 5th anniversary, I left them behind in plain sight. They were meaningless, and discarding them was its own message. By the time Daniel came home that evening, the locks had already been changed. I stood just inside the door, listening to his fists pound against the wood, his voice muffled but frantic. "Claire, opened the door. We need to talk. It's not what you think." His tone swung between pleading and defensive, but none of it mattered anymore. I cracked the door just wide enough for him to see me. His face was pale, his tie loosened, his eyes darting with desperation. I held his gaze calm and unflinching. "You don't live here anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Then I closed the door with finality, the lock clicking into place like the sound of a gavel. He shouted for another 5 minutes, threats tangled with apologies, before the hallway fell silent. I pressed my forehead against the door, my body trembling, but inside, I felt something sharp and certain the power had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging him to see me or pleading for him to care. I was standing on solid ground. The following 48 hours unfolded like a chain of falling dominoes. I didn't have to push hard. Everything unraveled on its own once I stopped holding it together. His card declined at a midtown steakhouse in front of investors. Camille's social media posts filled with venomous comments, strangers calling her a homewrecker, acquaintances whispering about the boy who looked just like Daniel. By Monday, her firm quietly removed her name from their website. Daniel's family began calling. His mother's voice trembled when she asked if it was true if the boy was his. Someone had already filmed the anniversary party, capturing the moment the child called him daddy, and my hand struck his cheek. The video spread quickly, sent through group chats and shared online. "I don't know how he could do this," she whispered, almost ashamed. For once, I didn't soften the truth. Because you raised a man who thinks he can have everything without consequence. Later, his father called sharp and furious. "Do you realize what you've done to this family's reputation?" He barked, placing blame on me instead of his son. I almost laughed at the absurdity. "What I've done? Your son cheated on his wife with her best friend and fathered a child. Worry about him." He hung up without another word, and that silence told me everything. They were already stepping back from him. By Tuesday night, Daniel was camped outside the condo again, buzzing the intercom until the doorman threatened to call the police. I looked out the window and saw him. His suit wrinkled, his tie hanging loose, shouting my name into the dark street. "Claire, please. Don't do this to me. Think about Lily. Think about us." His voice cracked in a way I had never heard before, raw and stripped of performance. I watched from behind the curtain, my daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, and felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just clarity. He was finally learning what it felt like to lose control, and I knew deep in my bones that this was only the beginning. The first moves of revenge weren't loud or dramatic. They were quiet, deliberate, and precise, just like the way I used to balance our household accounts late at night. I didn't need to shout or beg anymore. All I had to do was make sure the truth found its way into the right hands. Daniel had built his image on polish and charm. He believed he could spin anything into a story that served him, and for years I let myself believe that too. But now I had the receipts. My sister's photo, the messages on his forgotten phone, the paternity documents Camille once carelessly sent to him, all of it was proof. I didn't blast them out myself. That would have been reckless. Instead, I slipped them to someone who lived for scandals in Manhattan. Within hours, their account lit up with screenshots, and by sunrise, Daniel's name was paired with words like liar and cheater. I watched it unfold quietly from my kitchen, sipping coffee as Lily colored beside me. Social media was merciless. Strangers stitched together videos of his denials with his own text messages. Hashtags sprouted overnight mocking his interviews, where he swore Camille was just a family friend. One clip showed him insisting the child wasn't his, immediately followed by the paternity form with his signature. The internet didn't forgive contradictions, and it certainly didn't forgive lies exposed so plainly. Camille tried to defend herself at first. A shaky video appeared on her account where she spoke of misunderstandings and privacy. But within hours, someone leaked emails from her firm about disciplinary action she'd faced for conduct affecting professional responsibilities. That video only fueled the fire, and by evening, her profile was gone entirely. She had vanished, but the damage was permanent. Meanwhile, Daniel's investors grew restless. A partner reached out to me directly, his tone clipped and uneasy. "Can you confirm if the child is his? Because if it's true, we need to prepare for fallout." I didn't give him everything. I simply said, "You should brace for more to come." The silence that followed was all the confirmation I needed. They were losing faith in him, and he knew it. Daniel's attempt at damage control was almost pitiful. He posted a photo of himself at a cafe, sleeves rolled, staring into the distance as though deep in thought. His captions spoke of challenges and the importance of family. For a few hours, loyal acquaintances offered encouragement, but the replies turned savage. Side-by-side photos of him and the boy filled the comments, strangers mocking his carefully crafted words. Every time he tried to shape a narrative, the truth sliced through. At night, he sent me messages that swung from anger to pleading. "You had no right to freeze those accounts." Then minutes later, "Please don't ruin me. We can fix this." I forwarded everything to Tessa. "Keep it all," she told me. "Every word is evidence." And she was right. His desperation wasn't my burden anymore. It was documentation of who he really was. For years, I had been the quiet one in the background, balancing books while he played the big man in boardrooms. Now the roles had reversed. He was the one scrambling, and I was the one watching calmly as the structure of his world collapsed. The gossip that once fueled his pride now fed his humiliation. People whispered about him at parties, not with admiration, but with derision. The impact on Camille was just as sharp. Her once spotless reputation among colleagues and family crumbled overnight. I heard through acquaintances that her parents were horrified, their disapproval loud and unrelenting. She withdrew from gatherings, her phone going unanswered, her name spoken only in hushed tones. I didn't have to confront her. Her own choices had already stripped her of everything she once valued. I knew Daniel wouldn't stop trying to claw his way back. He had always believed in performance, that if he stood tall enough and smiled wide enough, people would overlook the rot beneath. But this time, I had stripped away the mask, and the world saw him clearly. Every article, every mocking post, every investor pulling out was proof that the stage lights were gone. The satisfaction wasn't wild or giddy, it was measured steady like water finding its level. Each step I took wasn't about vengeance alone. It was about balance, about watching truth replace illusion. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Public disgrace was one thing, but the real reckoning had yet to come. The courtroom would be where everything solidified assets custody, the final severing of ties. And as Daniel flailed publicly, I prepared privately, making sure I was ready for the fight ahead. The stage was set. The world had seen his lies for what they were, and I had only taken the first steps. The rest, the deeper dismantling, was still to come. Daniel's downfall in public began like a whisper, but by the time it swelled into a roar, he was already trapped. He thought his image could be patched with practiced charm and staged interviews, but each attempt only deepened the cracks. I sat at my kitchen table one morning, Lily coloring at my side, when the television played his voice. He sat on a talk show couch, his hands folded neatly, his tone soft and rehearsed. "There have been rumors," he said, "but Camille is only a family friend. The child isn't mine. People are twisting the truth." The host nodded sympathetically, but I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that rose in my throat. Hours later, I sent the receipts to the gossip account that had already spread his name across the city. Screenshots of his texts to Camille appeared online, promises that I would never know, messages about hotel rooms, reminders about pediatric appointments. His words cut through the television performance like a blade. By nightfall, The clip of his denial was stitched side by side with those messages, strangers reading them aloud with mocking voices. Camille tried to save herself too. She posted a video with her makeup streaked, insisting the world didn't understand and asking people to leave her child alone. But truth is merciless when it's been hidden too long. Someone released internal memos from her law firm documents showing she'd been warned before about inappropriate behavior. The story wasn't just scandal anymore. It was evidence. By the end of that week, her career was gone. Her profile deleted her silence louder than anything she could have said. Daniel's desperation grew by the day. He hired a crisis management firm that drafted a statement about protecting children from speculation, but it read like smoke in the wind. It couldn't undo the paternity form with his signature, the one Camille had once emailed him in carelessness. When I released that anonymously, the conversation ended. There was no spinning away from proof on letterhead, no denying the boy with his face. My phone buzzed nonstop with updates. Friends sent me links, strangers tagged me in support, and the city's gossip pulsed with his name. Hush, Daddy. Liar trended for days. Videos of him speaking at conferences resurfaced, audiences now laughing at the man who once commanded attention. Invitations to industry events dried up. Partners withdrew. For every stage he had once sought out, doors now closed with finality. I didn't feel triumph. What settled over me was steadiness, as though balance had finally been restored. I didn't need to shout his sins from rooftops. I only needed to stop covering them, and the truth carried its own weight. The calls from his family shifted with the tide. His mother's voice was tearful, apologetic, pleading for Lily's sake. His father, however, grew cold, accusing me of tearing down what Daniel had built. But I knew better. He had torn it down himself, brick by brick, with every lie and every secret. Even his brother, the golden son of their family, left a voicemail that later made its way to court. I can't have my name tied to this circus. Daniel was isolated, his last supports dissolving beneath him. In the middle of the night, he showed up again outside my building. I stood behind the curtain watching as he paced on the sidewalk, tie undone, his voice hoarse as he shouted up to my window. Claire, please, we can fix this. Don't let them destroy me. His words carried no weight anymore. The truth had already done what I never could, exposed him without mercy. I closed the curtain and tucked Lily back into bed, brushing her hair from her face as she slept. For years, I had begged Daniel to be present to care for our family. Now, the only thing present in my life was his absence, and it was a relief. The breaking point had arrived. His mask was gone, his reputation shredded, his pride stripped in front of the same crowd he once tried to impress. And I knew this was only the beginning of his reckoning. The courtroom would come next, and in there, under oath, the collapse would be complete. The courtroom was nothing like the quiet strength of my kitchen or the charged silence of that anniversary party. It felt like a stage where every word, every file, every small detail could alter the rest of my life. I walked in with Tessa at my side, carrying folders stacked with evidence that had become my shield. Daniel sat across the aisle, his suit pressed, but his face weary, like a man clinging to the scraps of an identity already gone. When the petition was read, Daniel leaned back in his chair as if this was another negotiation, another deal he could charm his way through. "We don't need to make this ugly," he said during the first mediation. His voice soft, almost pleading. "We can split things down the middle." He glanced at me with a faint smile, the same smile that once convinced me he would never betray me. Tessa's response cut through his performance. "Considering the condo is solely in Claire's name, the accounts are frozen, and your client fathered a child outside the marriage, I suggest you reconsider what middle means." The smirk slipped from his face, and for the first time in months, I saw the truth of his fear. The process was deliberate, but it was ruthless. The condo was mine. It had been purchased with my inheritance, the deed signed only in my name. His lawyer tried to argue marital contribution, but Judge McNeil shook his head. Contribution requires proof, he said firmly, and this court has seen none. The ruling landed like a gavel strike inside my chest. That home, once filled with lies, was now proof of my own survival. Next came the financial trail. Every transfer, every Venmo payment, every receipt for formula and doctor visits tied back to Camille and the boy. I laid them before the court like puzzle pieces, and together they painted a picture Daniel could no longer deny. He shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming the table, but no explanation came. Even the judge's expression hardened as the evidence piled up. His business, once the pride of his family, was already faltering. Contracts had been abandoned after the scandal, investors gone silent. The equity he tried to hold up as bargaining power was little more than debt. Yet even in ruin, the court secured my share of any future profit, a tether that would ensure Lily's support if he ever attempted to rebuild. For Daniel, every outcome cut deeper than the last. The custody hearing was the heaviest. His lawyer painted him as a loving father, misunderstood by gossip and hounded by lies. But the documents told another story. Missed appointments, missed birthdays, trips that lined up with Camille's schedule. Messages where I begged him to be present, and he brushed me off with excuses. The final blow was the paternity document proof of the child he had hidden while mine sat at home waiting for his attention. The judge's voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. This court does not consider Mr. Whitman a reliable custodial parent at this time. Custody will remain primarily with Mrs. Whitman. Visitation supervised and limited will be contingent upon counseling. I felt Daniel's eyes on me then, hot with rage, but I didn't turn my head. The judgment wasn't just about custody. It was about truth finally given its weight. Outside the courthouse, the cracks spread wider. His father called me with a clipped voice, saying the family would no longer support him. Michael is no longer welcome under this family's name. He said his words tight with disappointment. His mother, in contrast, cried over the phone, apologizing for her son's choices and offering to help with Lily however she could. I accepted her kindness for my daughter's sake, but I kept my heart guarded. Forgiveness would not come easily, not this time. Even Camille's family turned away. Her parents, deeply religious, sent me a handwritten letter filled with sorrow, begging me not to judge them for their daughter's sins. I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. They were not my enemies, but they couldn't undo what had been done. Camille herself slipped into silence, whispers of her moving upstate with the boy trailing through acquaintances. She was gone from the city, from the circles where she once stood so proudly. By the time the divorce was finalized, Daniel had nothing left. The condo was sold on my terms, the funds reinvested in a future I could control. My accounts were secure, my daughter safe in my care, and his reputation beyond repair. He moved into a small apartment in Queens. His furniture borrowed, his dignity stripped away. I heard through acquaintances that he struggled to find investors, every meeting shadowed by the weight of his name and the story everyone already knew. The last time I saw him in that courtroom, his lawyer whispering in his ear, he tried to catch my eyes. I kept mine fixed on the judge, my pen steady as I signed the papers that cut the last ties between us. I walked out without a backward glance. He had lost his home, his wealth, his family's support, and the life he thought untouchable. Piece by piece, everything he once held had collapsed, not through chaos, but through consequence. Justice had been served. But even as I walked away with the gavel's echo still ringing in my ears, I knew the story wasn't over. One final meeting remained, the moment where the mask was gone, where Daniel would face me without an audience, stripped to the man he had always been underneath. Daniel asked to see me one last time. The message came in the middle of the night, his words uneven, desperate, and stripped of the bravado he once wore like armor. Against my better judgment, I agreed. A small cafe downtown was the place we chose, the same one where we used to share bagels when we were newlyweds, still full of plans and naive dreams. He was already seated when I arrived, shoulders hunched, his suit ill-fitting, his eyes dull. He looked older than his years, as though every lie had carved its mark into his face. When he spoke, his voice cracked, pleading for forgiveness, promising change, swearing he could be better. I sat across from him, listening quietly, letting his words scatter across the table like spilled sugar. I reminded him that forgiveness is earned, not begged for, at the 11th hour. He had chosen his actions. He had built his own ruin. I wasn't there to rescue him anymore. For years, I had begged him to be honest, to be present, to be a partner and a father. He hadn't listened, and now the silence between us was heavier than any plea he could offer. When I stood to leave, his hand twitched, as if to reach for mine, but I pulled away before he could touch me. I told him he was the architect of his own destruction, and I was done covering the cracks. Then I walked out, each step lighter than the last, the cold city air filling my lungs with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. Life afterward didn't suddenly become simple. Healing came slowly in small pieces. There were nights I still lay awake wondering how I missed the signs, mornings where I questioned whether I had ruined Lily's chance at a traditional family. But little by little, the weight lifted. Selling the condo gave us the fresh start we needed. Our new apartment was smaller, but it was ours, bright, peaceful, and free of secrets. I rebuilt myself one step at a time. I poured energy into my consulting work, using the same discipline I once gave to managing Daniel's chaos. Clients came quickly, not because of his name, but because of my own steadiness. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's wife or someone's shadow. I was simply myself, building a life on honest ground. Lily adjusted faster than I expected. She asked questions at first: why Daddy didn't live with us, why Auntie Camille disappeared. But I answered with honesty she could understand. Daddy made choices that hurt our family, I told her. But you are loved always. She nodded, and in her resilience, I found my own strength. Her laughter filled our new home, echoing through the rooms like proof that we were healing together. As for Daniel and Camille, they faded into whispers. His career never recovered. His family withdrew their support, and Camille vanished from the city's circles. I don't think of them with anger anymore. They are pieces of a past that no longer belongs to me. What matters is the life I built in their absence, the freedom of standing without their shadows. Sometimes I pass landmarks that used to sting: the hotel ballroom, the restaurants where his name once carried weight, and I feel nothing. Those places no longer hold power over me. They are simply buildings empty of meaning. My worth was never tied to them, and it certainly was never tied to him. The lesson Betrayal left me with is simple, though not easy. We cannot stop people from showing us who they are, but we can decide what we do once we finally see it. I chose to stop covering for lies. I chose to protect my dignity and my daughter's future. In that choice, I found a strength I didn't know I had. Tonight, as I watch Lily draw pictures at the kitchen table, humming to herself, I realize I'm not walking away from anything anymore. I am walking toward the life I created with my own hands. Betrayal broke me open, but freedom rebuilt me. And I am stronger, clearer, and steadier than I ever was before. Before we close, I'd love to know what part of this journey spoke most to you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more true family stories, stay connected here.